The early morning sun was shining through the thin clouds, turning the hills golden. The air was cool and clean, and birds were singing from the tall trees. Two brothers, Rian and Thomas, started their hike that day with calm faces and strong steps. They loved being close to nature and far away from the noisy town. Hiking was something they did often when they needed to clear their minds. This time, however, it was not just for adventure. Their mother, Mira, had been sick for a long time. She was kind and gentle, and the brothers loved her more than anything in the world. Mira often sat near the window of their small house watching the hills far away. She used to live in the countryside when she was young, and she always told her sons that she missed the sound of the wind, the smell of pine trees, and the peace of the wild. One evening, she had said quietly that her dream was to spend her last years close to nature again. That thought stayed in the hearts of her sons. Rian and Thomas decided they would find a place where their mother could rest peacefully. They did not have much money, but they had strong hands, good hearts, and faith that something good would happen if they tried. So they packed their bags, took food for 2 days, carried tools like ropes, knives, and a small tent, and started walking toward the hills that stood behind the town. The trail was long and full of turns. At first, it passed through open fields with yellow grass and wildflowers. The brothers walked side by side, talking about old times and making jokes to keep their spirits high. As they climbed higher, the air grew cooler and the path became steeper. They stopped sometimes to drink water and enjoy the view. The sound of birds mixed with the whisper of the wind made everything feel alive. Tomas said the air smelled clean like rain. Ryan smiled and said it was the smell of freedom. Both laughed, and their laughter echoed across the hills. They followed a narrow dirt path that seemed forgotten by people. The trees grew thicker around them, and sunlight passed through the branches in golden lines. The ground was covered with fallen leaves that made a soft sound under their boots. After walking for many hours, they reached a wide valley hidden between two ridges. A small stream flowed gently through the center, and the grass around it looked fresh and green. It was a quiet and beautiful place. Rian and Thomas sat by the stream to eat and rest. They drank cool water from the stream and felt refreshed. While they rested, Thomas lay on his back and looked up at the sky. The clouds were slowly moving, and the sound of water made him feel calm. Rian looked around the valley with interest. He loved exploring. Then his eyes caught something strange in the distance, partly hidden by trees. It looked like a straight line that did not belong to nature. He stood up and walked a few steps forward. It seemed like a corner of a wall or maybe a piece of an old fence. He pointed it out to his brother. Thomas sat up and squinted to see. The shape looked like part of a small house hidden among the trees. Both brothers felt curious and decided to go check. They crossed the stream, pushed through the bushes, and walked toward the strange shape. As they came closer, they saw wooden walls covered with moss. It was a small cabin standing silently among the trees. The roof was broken in some parts, the door was hanging loose, and the windows were dusty and cracked. It looked old, forgotten, and lonely. Ryan stepped closer and touched the wood. It was rough and dry, but strong in some parts. Thomas looked at the chimney made of stone and said it might still work if cleaned. Ryan carefully pushed the door open. It creaked loudly and revealed a dark room filled with dust. Sunlight came through small holes in the roof, making soft beams inside. They entered slowly. The air smelled of old wood and earth. Inside there was a small table with 2 chairs, a stone fireplace, and a shelf with a few rusty tools. There was also a bed frame made of wood without a mattress. On one wall hung a faded picture in a cracked frame. It showed a man and a woman standing proudly in front of the same cabin. The picture told a quiet story of a time long gone. Thomas looked around and said that once this must have been a happy home. Ryan nodded and said maybe it could become one again. He imagined their mother sitting near the fireplace with a blanket, smiling at the trees outside. The thought filled him with warmth. They spent some time looking around the area. Behind the cabin was an old wooden shed half broken and covered in vines. There were a few rusty nails, an axe head, and an empty barrel. The ground was uneven, but grass and small flowers had grown there. Thomas said if they cleared the place and repaired the roof, it could become a nice little home. Ryan agreed. He said it would take work, but it was possible. Evening started to fall. The sky turned orange and pink. The brothers decided to set up their tent near the cabin for the night. They collected dry branches and started a small fire near the stream. The warm light of the fire made the cabin glow softly in the dark. They cooked simple food, shared stories, and talked about what they could do next. Tomas said maybe this cabin was a sign. Ryan smiled and said maybe fate wanted them to find it. They both looked at the cabin again. It stood there quietly, as if waiting for someone to bring it back to life. When the stars came out, they lay down inside their tent. The night was calm. They could hear the gentle flow of the stream and the sound of crickets. Thomas whispered that he hoped this place could become their mother's dream home. Ryan said they would make it happen no matter how hard it was. As they drifted to sleep, they felt peace in their hearts. The forest around them was silent except for the soft rustling of leaves. The cabin stood still under the moonlight. It looked old and tired, but also full of hidden hope. The brothers did not know what the coming days would bring, but they were ready. They had found something special, something that called to them from the heart of the wild. The stars shone bright over the hills, and the night wrapped everything in silver light. It was the beginning of a journey that would change their lives and the life of their mother forever. The next morning came with the sound of birds singing and sunlight touching the tops of the trees. The forest looked alive and bright. Ryan was the first to wake up. He stepped out of the tent and stretched his arms. The cool air filled his lungs and made him feel fresh. He looked at the old cabin standing a few steps away. It looked the same as last night, but somehow less lonely in the morning light. Thomas came out soon after. He rubbed his eyes and smiled. He said the place looked beautiful in daylight. Ryan nodded and said they should start checking the cabin properly. They ate a quick breakfast and packed their small things. After that, they both started working around the cabin to understand what needed to be done. Ryan walked around the outside walls while Thomas checked the inside. The roof had some holes where rainwater could enter. The walls were strong in some parts but rotten in others. The windows were broken and the floor inside had cracks. Still, it was not hopeless. The main structure was good enough to fix. Ryan took out a small notebook and began to write things they would need. He listed wooden planks, nails, hammers, glass for windows, and ropes. He also wrote that they should find a way to clean the roof and fix the chimney. Thomas said they could collect some of the wood from the forest, but would need tools from the town. The brothers decided to stay there for another day to clean and plan everything. Thomas started removing the broken furniture while Ryan swept away dust and leaves from the floor. The sound of sweeping and the crack of dry wood filled the air. It was hard work, but both were full of energy and excitement. Every time they looked around, they imagined their mother smiling inside the cabin. That thought kept them strong. By noon, they had cleared most of the inside space. The air felt lighter, and sunlight entered through the broken windows. They found old things like a metal cup, an oil lamp without oil, and some torn papers that looked like letters. Thomas placed the old items in a corner. He said they should keep them as memories of the people who once lived there. Ryan agreed. He said the cabin had a story and they were becoming part of it now. After resting for a while, they began to clean the area outside. They cut the grass and removed fallen branches. They found a small stone path that had been hidden under dirt and leaves. It led from the cabin door to the stream. Thomas smiled and said it looked like a path someone once made to get water every morning. Ryan followed the stones with his hand and said they could repair it too. As the day passed, they both became tired but happy. They had made the place look better already. When the evening came, they built another small fire near the stream and cooked food again. The smell of smoke and cooked rice filled the air. They sat near the fire and looked at their work. Tomas said he could almost imagine their mother sitting near the door with a cup of tea. Ryan said soon it would be real. The next morning, they packed their things and walked back to the town. The trail felt shorter this time because their minds were full of plans. When they reached home, their mother was sitting by the window as always. She smiled when she saw them. Her eyes were tired but full of love. She asked where they had been, and Thomas told her they had gone hiking to the hills. He said they found a beautiful valley that looked peaceful. Mira listened with interest and said the hills always had magic in them. After dinner, when their mother went to rest, Ryan showed Thomas the list he had written. They decided to buy only the most needed materials first because they did not have much money. They worked in a small repair shop in the town, so they could borrow some tools from their boss. The next morning, they visited the shop owner and told him they were fixing an old cabin in the hills. The man liked their idea and gave them nails, a hammer, and an old saw. He said he was proud of their effort and wished them luck. For the next few days, the brothers gathered supplies. They bought wooden planks, glass for windows, ropes, and a small tin of paint. They also borrowed a cart from a friend to carry everything. It took them almost a week to prepare everything they needed. Their mother noticed how busy they were but did not ask too many questions. She thought they were working on a small project for their job. When everything was ready, Ryan and Thomas woke up early and started their journey back to the hills with the cart full of tools and materials. The road was rough, and they had to push and pull together. Sometimes they laughed when the wheels got stuck in the mud. It was hard work, but they never complained. By noon, they reached the valley again. The cabin waited for them silently, just as they had left it. The brothers smiled and felt proud to be back. They unloaded their things and started working right away. Rian began fixing the roof by replacing the broken wooden planks. Thomas cleaned the chimney and made sure it was safe to use. They worked until sunset, sweating and smiling at the same time. At night, they rested near the fire again. Thomas said the cabin already looked a little alive. Ryan said it would soon become a home again. The stars above them were bright, and the wind carried the smell of pine trees. They both felt that the forest was watching them with kindness. Over the next few days, they repaired the floor, replaced the broken windows, and painted the walls inside. They cleaned the fireplace and tested it with a small fire. It worked perfectly. The warm light filled the cabin, and both brothers stood silently for a while, feeling proud. Ryan said it felt like they had given life back to something that was lost. Thomas said their mother would love it. They also fixed the small stone path outside and made a wooden bench near the stream. Every evening they sat there, talking about their mother and remembering her stories. They wanted to finish everything before bringing her there because they wanted it to be a surprise. When the roof was complete, they cleaned the area one last time and added small things to make it comfortable. Tomas carved a small wooden nameplate and hung it above the door. It said, "Mira's Rest." Ryan smiled when he saw it. He said their mother would be happy to see her name on the cabin. As the sun went down behind the trees, the cabin looked new again. Its walls shined softly in the golden light, and smoke rose gently from the chimney. The brothers stood side by side watching the result of their hard work. Thomas said they had turned an abandoned house into a home. Rian nodded and said it was only the beginning. They decided that the next morning, they would return to town and bring their mother to see the surprise. Their hearts were full of hope and excitement. The cabin, once silent and forgotten, now waited for its new owner with open arms. The morning sun rose slowly over the hills. The cabin looked beautiful in the soft light. Its new roof shined a little, and the smell of fresh paint still hung in the air. The stream nearby sparkled like glass, and the forest seemed to welcome the new life that had returned to the valley. Ryan and Thomas stood outside with proud smiles on their faces. They had worked for many days and finally finished what they started. Thomas said their mother would not believe her eyes when she saw it. Ryan agreed and said this would be the happiest day of her life. They both packed their tools and made sure the cabin was clean and safe. Before leaving, Rian walked inside once more. He looked around and touched the wooden wall gently. He whispered that the cabin was ready for a new story. Then both brothers started their journey back to town to bring their mother to her new home. The path down the hill was long, but their steps were light. They were full of excitement. When they reached the town in the afternoon, the sky was bright and clear. Their mother was sitting near the window as usual, sewing a piece of cloth. She looked tired but peaceful. When she saw her sons, her face lit up with happiness. She asked where they had been all this time. Ryan smiled and said they had been working on something special for her. Mira looked at them with surprise. She asked what kind of work it was, but Tomas said it was a secret, and that she would know soon. She laughed softly and said they always brought surprises for her since childhood. The next morning, Ryan told her to wear something warm, because they were going on a short trip. She asked where, but they only said she would find out. They packed a small bag with food and water, and helped her into a cart that Tomas borrowed from a friend. The road to the hills was slow, but the weather was perfect. The wind was gentle and the sky was blue. Mira kept looking around, smiling at the beauty of the countryside. She said it reminded her of the days when she was young and full of dreams. As they moved higher into the hills, the trees became thicker, and the sound of birds filled the air. Ryan told her about the peaceful valley they had found, and Thomas described how beautiful the forest looked. She listened quietly, enjoying every word. When they finally reached the valley, the brothers helped her step down from the cart. She stood still for a moment, looking around at the tall trees and the small stream that flowed nearby. Then she saw the cabin. For a moment, she did not understand what she was looking at. The cabin stood strong and bright, its walls clean and roof shining under the sunlight. Flowers grew near the entrance, and smoke rose gently from the chimney. It looked simple but full of life. Mira covered her mouth with her hand as her eyes filled with tears. Thomas smiled and said that this was the surprise. Ryan walked to the door and opened it wide. He said this was her new home. Mira slowly walked toward the cabin. Her hands trembled as she touched the doorframe. The wood was smooth and warm under her fingers. She stepped inside, and her eyes moved from the fireplace to the windows and the small table in the corner. The sunlight entered through the glass and filled the room with golden light. She turned toward her sons and said she had never seen anything so kind in her life. She said the cabin felt alive and full of peace. Ryan said they found it by accident while hiking, and they knew right away that it was meant for her. Thomas said they had fixed everything with their own hands so she could live close to nature again. Mira sat on the wooden chair near the fireplace and looked around with a smile. She said it felt like her old home from years ago, the one she always talked about. She thanked her sons again and again, and her voice shook with emotion. Ryan said all they wanted was to see her happy. Tomas said it was their turn to take care of her now. They spent the rest of the day together in the cabin. Mira helped them arrange things inside. She placed a small blanket on the bed and put flowers in an old cup she found on the shelf. She said the cabin felt like it was waiting for them all these years. The brothers went outside to gather more wood for the fire. The sound of chopping and laughter filled the air. For the first time in months, their mother's laughter joined theirs. As evening came, they lit the fire in the fireplace. The warm glow filled the cabin, and the smell of burning wood made everything feel cozy. Mira sat near the fire with a cup of tea that Thomas made for her. Ryan sat beside her, and together they watched the flames dance. She said she could not remember the last time she felt so peaceful. She told them that the sound of the wind and the singing of birds made her heart feel alive again. When night fell, they all went outside for a while. The stars filled the sky like silver dust. The stream made a soft sound, and the forest around them felt calm. Mira said this place was a gift from heaven. She told her sons that she would keep it clean and safe so that it would always remain full of peace. They slept that night inside the cabin. Ryan and Thomas used sleeping bags on the floor while their mother slept on the bed. The sound of the forest outside became their lullaby. The cabin stood strong under the moonlight, its chimney releasing a thin line of smoke into the clear sky. The next morning, when Ryan woke up, he saw his mother standing near the window. She was watching the sunlight pass through the trees. Her face looked fresh and her eyes were bright. She said she felt stronger than before. She also said that she had dreamed of the man and woman whose picture hung on the wall. She said in the dream they were smiling at her, as if happy that their home was full of life again. Ryan told Thomas about her dream, and both felt it was a good sign. They decided to fix a few more things before leaving her to rest. They repaired the shed, made a small garden near the stream, and set up a wooden fence. Mira helped by planting flowers and vegetables. Her hands were weak, but she worked slowly and smiled often. By the time the sun was high, the place looked full of color and hope. The garden was small but beautiful. Thomas said they should bring more seeds next time. Ryan said they could also bring some chairs for the porch. Mira said she already had everything she needed because she had peace. Before returning to town that evening, Ryan and Thomas promised to visit her every few days. Mira thanked them and hugged them tightly. She said they had given her not just a home but also a reason to live again. The brothers smiled and said they would always be there for her. As they walked back down the trail, they looked behind once more. The cabin stood among the trees, glowing in the soft sunlight. Smoke rose gently from the chimney, and their mother waved from the porch. The valley looked alive and full of joy. The brothers felt proud and peaceful. They knew they had done something truly good. The days that followed were calm and full of peace. Mira settled into her new life at the cabin easily. Every morning she woke up early to the sound of birds singing near her window. She would step outside and sit on the small wooden bench near the stream, watching the sunlight dance on the water. The fresh air made her feel alive again. Her cheeks had color now, and she moved with more strength than before. Rian and Thomas visited her every few days. They brought food, supplies, and seeds for her garden. Sometimes they stayed the night, sitting near the fireplace and talking about old memories. Mira often told them stories from her youth, stories about when she lived in the countryside with her parents. The brothers loved listening to her gentle voice while the fire crackled softly beside them. One morning, Thomas noticed that dark clouds were gathering over the hills. The air was heavy and the wind had a strange sound. He told his brother that a storm might be coming soon. Ryan looked at the sky and agreed. He said they should make sure the cabin was ready. They spent the day fixing small things like tightening the door hinges and placing extra stones around the roof to make it stronger against wind. When the evening came, the brothers returned to town because they had work the next day. Mira told them not to worry, saying she would be fine and that she loved watching the rain from her window. They hugged her before leaving and promised to return soon. The storm began that night. It came with strong winds and heavy rain. In the town, Rian could hear the thunder rolling over the hills. He tried to stay calm, but worry filled his heart. He kept thinking about their mother sitting alone in the cabin. Thomas tried to comfort him, saying that they had built the roof strong and that their mother was brave. Still, neither of them could sleep that night. The storm lasted through the night and into the next morning. The rain was so heavy that the river near the town began to rise. The wind blew so hard that trees bent under its force. When the rain finally stopped, the sky turned gray and mist covered the hills. Ryan and Thomas looked at each other. Without saying a word, they packed food, blankets, and tools and started walking toward the cabin. The path was muddy, and water ran down the slopes. It was hard to climb, but they did not stop. They moved quickly, slipping sometimes, but holding each other for balance. Their hearts were heavy with fear for their mother's safety. After hours of walking, they finally reached the valley. The air smelled of wet soil and pine. The cabin stood there, strong and safe. Its roof was wet but still firm. Smoke rose gently from the chimney and the garden was full of rainwater. Mira came out of the door when she saw her sons. Her eyes were bright and her face showed relief. She said she knew they would come. Rian hugged her tightly and asked if she was fine. She smiled and said the cabin protected her from the wind and rain. She said she had spent the night by the fire, reading an old book and listening to the sound of the storm. Thomas walked around the cabin to check everything. He saw that one side of the fence had fallen, and a few flower pots were broken, but nothing serious had happened. The brothers helped her clean the garden and fix the fence. Mira told them that when the wind was strongest, she prayed that her sons were safe in the town. Ryan said he did the same for her. They all laughed softly, feeling thankful that nothing bad had happened. After finishing the work, Thomas repaired the small window that had cracked during the storm. Ryan collected firewood and stacked it neatly near the wall. Mira made soup for them, and they ate together by the fireplace. The warmth of the room made them forget the cold rain outside. That evening, the sky cleared and the stars appeared again. The valley smelled fresh and clean after the rain. Rian sat with his mother outside while Thomas brought his small guitar and played a slow tune. The sound of the strings mixed with the gentle flow of the stream. Mira closed her eyes and said she felt like the earth was singing to her. Ryan said the cabin had truly become part of her life now. As the days passed, the cabin became a small symbol of hope for the whole family. The brothers started bringing small gifts for their mother each time they visited. Once they brought a new chair. Another time they brought colorful curtains. Mira placed each thing carefully inside, always thanking them with a smile. She said the cabin was not only a house but also a dream made real by love, but life in the hills was not always easy. One day when Rian and Thomas arrived, they found their mother sitting outside with a worried look. She said she had seen strangers walking near the valley 2 nights ago. She had heard voices and footsteps in the distance. Thomas looked around and saw footprints near the stream. Ryan said maybe it was travelers passing through, but he promised to keep an eye on it. That night they stayed with her. They sat near the fire and listened carefully to the sounds outside. The forest was quiet except for the usual wind and insects. No one came. By morning the worry had faded and Mira said maybe it was her imagination. Still, Thomas said he would make a wooden sign near the path that said private property to keep people from wandering too close. Ryan agreed. The next few weeks went smoothly. The garden grew better than before. The flowers bloomed again and vegetables started to appear. Mira spent her days watering the plants, cooking simple meals, and watching the sunrise. Her health was much better now. The color had returned to her face and her smile was warm. One afternoon, Ryan brought a small wooden box. Inside it was a gift he had made with his own hands. It was a small model of the cabin carved from wood. He placed it on the table and said it was a memory for her to keep, even when they were away. Mira looked at it with tears in her eyes. She said she would treasure it forever. That evening, the brothers sat near the fire again. Thomas said he never thought a small hiking trip would change their lives so much. Ryan said sometimes fate leads people to the right place at the right time. They both looked at their mother sitting near the window, smiling at the stars. The cabin glowed softly behind her. The wind blew gently through the valley and the trees whispered in the dark. The storm had tested the strength of the cabin in their hearts, but they had come through it stronger than before. Ryan said that no matter what happened in life, they would always protect this place and their mother. Thomas placed his hand on his brother's shoulder and said that was a promise. The night grew quiet again. The sound of the stream, the smell of pine, and the steady flame in the fireplace filled the air. The cabin stood proud and peaceful, holding within its walls the love and courage of a small family that refused to give up hope. The days passed peacefully in the valley. Mira's health had improved greatly, and she moved with energy and happiness. Each morning she stepped outside to watch the sunlight touch the stream and trees. She often hummed softly while watering the small garden she had planted with flowers and vegetables. Her smile was warm and full of life, and the cabin had become the heart of their days. Ryan and Thomas continued to visit her regularly. They brought food, tools, and small gifts to make her life more comfortable. Sometimes they stayed for a week, helping with the garden, repairing small parts of the cabin, or chopping wood for the fireplace. Mira loved seeing them work together. She often said she felt safe and proud of her sons. One morning, the three of them sat outside on the wooden bench near the stream. The sunlight shone on the water, making it sparkle like silver. Mira held a small cup of tea while Ryan and Thomas rested after carrying firewood from the forest. The air smelled sweet from the blooming flowers and birds sang loudly. Mira said she felt like a child again, surrounded by life and love. Thomas smiled and said the cabin had brought more than shelter. It had brought happiness and hope. Ryan nodded and said that all their effort was worth it to see her smile. Mira took both of their hands in hers. She said she had always wished for a home like this, a place where she could be healthy, peaceful, and surrounded by love. Days turned into weeks, and Mira's energy grew. She started to cook more often, bake simple bread, and even gather herbs from the forest for tea. The garden became her favorite place. She planted flowers along the path, vegetables in small rows, and small fruit plants near the stream. She said the cabin was alive now, full of life and color. One afternoon, Ryan and Thomas decided to explore the hills further. They wanted to find other places that could be useful for their mother. They discovered a small grove of trees nearby where wild fruits grew. Thomas picked some fruits while Ryan found a natural spring. They knew these would help Mira enjoy her days more. When they returned to the cabin, Mira was overjoyed to see the fresh fruits. She said the forest itself had given her gifts through her son's efforts. The brothers worked together to make small improvements around the cabin. They repaired the garden fence completely, made a wooden porch near the entrance, and even built a small bench beside the stream where Mira could sit and watch the water. Mira placed cushions on the bench and said it was now her favorite spot in the valley. One evening, Ryan suggested they celebrate the completion of all their work. They made a small fire near the cabin and cooked a simple meal together. Mira told stories from her youth, about how she had grown up helping her parents in a small farm far away. Ryan and Thomas listened carefully, asking questions and laughing at the happy memories. The warmth of the fire and the smell of cooked food made the cabin feel even more like home. After dinner, they sat outside and watched the sunset. The sky was filled with red and orange colors that reflected on the stream. Mira said she had never seen such beauty. Thomas said the hills had always been beautiful, but now they were even more special because they shared them with someone they loved. Ryan nodded and said that love made everything better. The nights in the cabin became calm and peaceful. Mira slept well in her warm bed, while her sons rested on sleeping bags near the fireplace. The gentle sound of the stream, the singing of night birds, and the rustling of leaves became the music of their nights. The cabin, once abandoned and lonely, now held laughter, warmth, and love inside its walls. One morning, Mira decided to make a small gift for her sons. She collected flowers from the garden and made a small bouquet. She also found a small piece of wood and carved their initials carefully. She placed it in the cabin, saying it was a symbol of gratitude and love. When Ryan and Thomas saw it, they were touched. They said the cabin had given them joy too, not just their mother. The seasons changed slowly in the valley. Spring brought new flowers. Summer brought warmth and fresh fruits. Autumn brought colorful leaves, and winter brought a soft blanket of snow. The cabin remained strong through every season. Mira loved seeing the snow covering the roof and the trees, and she would watch from her window while sipping warm tea. Ryan and Thomas helped her with the snow, clearing the path and stacking firewood for warmth. One day, while sitting by the stream, Mira spoke softly to her sons. She said she felt stronger than ever before. She said she had learned to enjoy every moment and to see beauty in simple things. Ryan said that was the life they had hoped to give her. Thomas said the cabin had become more than a house. It had become a home full of hope and love. The brothers also began teaching Mira some small tasks to make life easier. They showed her how to use the tools safely, how to plant more vegetables, and how to keep the cabin clean. Mira listened carefully and practiced with patience. She said it gave her confidence to be independent, yet she knew her sons would always be near when she needed help. One morning, a neighbor from a nearby hill came to visit. He had heard about the cabin and wanted to see it. Mira welcomed him warmly. She showed him the garden, the flowers, and the stream. The neighbor was amazed at how beautiful and peaceful the place was. He said it was rare to see such a home restored with so much love and care. Mira smiled and said that it was the work of her sons' hearts, not just their hands. The valley became even more alive with small visits from other neighbors and friends. Mira enjoyed sharing the peace and beauty with those she loved. She said the cabin had given her strength and hope, and she wanted to share it with others. Ryan and Thomas felt proud to see her happy and strong. Years passed gently. Mira's health remained strong, and her laughter filled the cabin every day. Ryan and Thomas continued to visit regularly, sometimes bringing friends or extra supplies. The cabin stood firm in the valley, surrounded by trees, flowers, and the soft sound of the stream. It had once been abandoned, but now it was a home full of life and happiness. One afternoon, Mira sat on the porch with her sons beside her. She looked around the valley, watching the sunlight through the trees. She said she had never imagined her life could be this beautiful. She thanked them once more, holding both of their hands. Ryan said it was their joy to make her happy. Thomas said that love and effort could create miracles. The sun began to set, painting the sky with soft colors. Mira, Ryan, and Thomas sat quietly, feeling the warmth of the day. The cabin glowed softly in the golden light, and the valley looked peaceful and safe. Mira whispered that this home had given her the greatest gift of all: hope, love, and a chance to live happily again. The brothers promised that no matter what happened in the future, they would always take care of the cabin and their mother. Mira smiled, feeling her heart full of gratitude. The cabin, once forgotten and empty, now held the life of a family, their love, and memories of hard work and hope. As night fell, they lit the fireplace, and the soft light filled every corner of the cabin. Outside, the stream reflected the stars above, and the forest whispered gently in the night. The valley was calm, peaceful, and alive with the joy of a family who had turned a forgotten cabin into a true home. And so, in that small valley surrounded by hills and trees, Mira, Ryan, and Thomas lived happily. The cabin became more than a house. It became a symbol of love, patience, courage, and the power of hope. Every stone, every plank, every flower in the garden carried the story of two sons who worked hard and gave their mother the life she had always dreamed of. The wind moved softly through the trees. The stream sang its gentle song, and the stars shone above the cabin that once was abandoned but now was full of life and joy forever.